Good evening and welcome to the first live transmission of the day with the news bulletin. And we start off with the U.S. Navy supervised maritime body announcing the expansion of a shipping lane in the Strait of Hormuz near the Omani coast. The Joint Maritime Information Center says the expanded corridor will allow two-way traffic for vessels entering and leaving the strait. U.S. media reported that the announcement is being viewed as a fresh warning to Iran as Washington moves to reopen and secure navigation through one of the world's most important maritime routes. Developments comes amid the continued efforts to restore normal shipping flows in the Strait of Hormuz, following weeks of disruption and heightened regional tensions. Maritime security concerns are rising again in the Strait of Hormuz after reports of a new attack on an oil tanker. The U.S. Navy-linked information center has raised the maritime threat level in the Strait of Hormuz to significantly high. Meanwhile, a British maritime authority said it received a report of a new incident in the waterway after an oil tanker was hit by an unknown projectile while transiting the strait. The vessel's captain reported damage from the attack, but authorities said there were no reports of environmental impact. The incident comes as Washington and its partners work to reopen and secure navigation through the strategic waterway. Iran is warning ships in the Strait of Hormuz to follow the routes set by Tehran as maritime tensions continue to rise. Iranian state television says the Revolutionary Guard's Navy will deal firmly with vessels that use routes different from those designated by Tehran in the Strait of Hormuz. It added that Iran's transit instructions for the waterway remain in force, calling on all ships to coordinate with the IRGC's Navy before entering or leaving the strait. The warning comes after maritime authorities raised the threat level in the strategic waterway and reported a new attack on an oil tanker. Washington is warning Tehran that sanctions relief and other exemptions could be reversed if Iran fails to meet its commitments under the Memorandum of Understanding. The Washington Post quoted a U.S. official as saying that the United States can cancel the exemptions granted to Tehran and reimpose pressure if Iran does not fulfill its obligations. The official said Tehran must move towards a final agreement if it wants to benefit from the arrangements in the long term. The remarks come after hours of renewed military exchanges with both sides targeting strategic sites. Washington said strikes hit Iranian missile and drone storage facilities, as well as coastal radar sites, while Tehran claimed it targeted U.S. positions in Bahrain. Iran is accusing the United States of violating the memorandum aimed at ending the war as tensions continue in the Strait of Hormuz. Ali Akbar Vadayati, an advisor to Iran's supreme leader, said Washington had violated the memorandum by fueling tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. He warned that Iran's response to any breach of the understanding would be swift and firm. The comments come amid rising maritime tensions after U.S.-linked and British maritime authorities reported heightened risks and new incidents in the strategic waterway. Iran has condemned U.S. airstrikes on sites along its southern coast, calling them a violation of the Memorandum of Understanding. Iran's foreign ministry said the U.S. strikes targeted coastal monitoring facilities and violated the memorandum of ending the war. Tehran said its own attacks on targets linked to U.S. forces were based on what it described as its inherent right to self-defense. The ministry also warned countries along the southern coast of the Gulf against allowing their territory to be used for attacks on Iran as tensions continue to rise around the Strait of Hormuz. Pakistan says it remains committed to supporting peace and stability in the region as diplomatic contacts with Iran continue. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaq Dar reaffirmed his country's commitment to regional peace and stability during a phone call with the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Iran's Foreign Minister expressed appreciation for Pakistan's continued support in advancing the peace process. He also thanked Islamabad for facilitating the safe and smooth return of Iranian crew members and fishermen to their homeland.
Field Marshal Sayyid Asim Munir helped mediate several rounds of intense and constructive negotiations.
Bahrain has condemned Iranian drone attacks on its territory, saying Tehran bears responsibility for undermining peace efforts. Bahrain Foreign Ministry said that the Iranian attacks involved several drones and represented a direct threat to the kingdom's sovereignty, security and stability. It said Tehran's continued attacks places full responsibility on Iran for undermining the efforts towards peace. The ministry added that the assault reflects an approach based on destabilizing security, exporting chaos and weakening regional stability. Bahrain also stressed its legitimate right to defend its sovereignty and called on the UN Security Council to assume its responsibilities and hold the attackers accountable. Egypt has strongly condemned Iranian drone attacks targeting Bahrain, warning that they threaten regional de-escalation efforts. In a statement, Egypt's foreign ministry said the attacks represent a violation of Bahrain's sovereignty and threats to its security and stability. Cairo said the strikes also undermine ongoing efforts to reduce tensions in the region. Egypt reaffirmed its full solidarity with Bahrain and support for all measures taken by Manama to protect its security and territorial integrity. The search for stability in the Middle East is no longer confined to the Gulf. In Lebanon, a separate diplomatic effort is now unfolding with potentially far-reaching consequences for the region.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Lebanon and Israel are moving ahead with a US-backed framework agreement aimed at ending months of fighting and restoring stability along the border. The agreement establishes a phased process for Israeli forces to withdraw from parts of southern Lebanon and hand control over to the Lebanese armed forces. It also provides for the creation of pilot zones free of non-state armed groups, with the Lebanese army assuming responsibility for security and administration in those areas. The framework includes political and security tracks aimed at reaching a broader and more permanent settlement, while the United States is expected to oversee the implementation through a trilateral coordination mechanism involving both sides. However, key issues remain unresolved, including the timeline for a full Israeli withdrawal and the future status of Hezbollah's weapons. The United States says the new Lebanon-Israel framework marks an important first step towards a broader settlement. Speaking during a signing ceremony, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio described the agreement as an important breakthrough, acknowledging that the first step is often the most difficult one. Washington hopes the framework will help build momentum for further political and security understandings between Lebanon and Israel following months of conflict and regional tensions.
Military level, other levels. Obviously, the president's very upset. You know, he feels like not just Italy, but other countries.
Hezbollah has rejected linking any Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon to the group's disarmament, calling the proposal extremely dangerous. Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem said tying Israel's withdrawal to Hezbollah's disarmament crosses what he described as all red lines. He stressed that the group has not left the field and will not do so. Qassem also dismissed the framework agreement signed by Lebanon and Israel in Washington, calling it non-existent, and said the US-Iran Memorandum of Understanding should be implemented instead. Lebanon says the framework agreement with Israel marks a victory for diplomacy and state institutions. The Lebanese Foreign Minister Youssef Raji said that the framework agreement with Israel represents a victory for the diplomatic solutions and reflects the success of political dialogue over confrontation. He added that the deal demonstrates the primacy of the state and institutions in addressing national security challenges. His remarks come as negotiations continue over security arrangements and the future of southern Lebanon following the recent ceasefire. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israeli troops will not withdraw from Lebanon until Hezbollah is disarmed. Netanyahu said any Israeli withdrawal from southern Lebanon would remain conditional on the disarmament of Hezbollah. Israeli Army Radio reported that the Prime Minister has identified 2 limited pilot areas for a possible withdrawal, including one north of the Litani River and another north of the security belt. Netanyahu stressed that the proposed pilot zones would not affect the size or scope of Israel's security buffer in southern Lebanon as negotiations continue over future security arrangements along the border. For more insights into these developments, let's now join my colleague Mona Sadhi and her guest for a closer look at the story. Mona, to you.
Thank you so much, Riham. And ladies and gentlemen, for more on the latest developments in Lebanon and the implications of the emerging diplomatic trauma, Egypt's Qalyubiyya Governorate by Omnia Ibrahim, political analyst and external affairs researcher. Ms. Omnia, good afternoon to you and welcome to Qnews. Let me start by asking you, how do you read Hezbollah's rejection of linking Israeli withdrawal to its disarmament?
Good afternoon. At first, I am happy to be with you. Hezbollah wants to be in advance and responsible for all Lebanon and making the decisions for the Lebanon nations. They are fighting for themselves, not for Lebanon. They make defeating for the Lebanon nations, not the Lebanons. They use their authority and violence to put their words in action and making a decision for themselves, but they make a bad effects and side effects of these actions on Lebanons and the Lebanon. They are making such that egg is egg. We are responsible for fighting for Lebanon and making the tricks that will be in exchange with Israel tricks and making the dust and not saving the souls and spirits in Lebanon, making good use for themselves, for their propaganda, and they making not helpful actions for Lebanon to solve all the problems and making sustainable peace in Lebanon.
Now, from your point of view, how would that do to the Lebanon-Israel framework agreement? Do you think it would weaken this agreement? What do you think?
It can be weakened by the actions of the Hezbollah and making the tricks. In action, Israel will make attacks and killing for souls. They weak or weakness assignment will be not in action, in my opinion. That's just words. The violence is found in action today, and making violence and making good reviews for acceptance of the peace process and calming. Yesterday, some revolutions or agreements for Hezbollah, making the Hezbollah youth going on the streets and making rejection for this assignment between Israel and Lebanon, and making a movement and affecting the streets for their own issue.
Hezbollah is a strong group in Lebanon and it has its own position. It has solidified it since decades. Now, do you think that the Lebanese state can move forward with this agreement without Hezbollah's approval or consent?
No, it can't be put in action. This is meant by the existence of Hezbollah. They will make an unstable status in Lebanon. They will refuse by words and by action. They will make movements and rejected population for that. It will be called no civil wars will be happen if it is continuously making this action by violence and rejection and not making the freedom for peace in Lebanon.
What do you think Hezbollah meant by saying that the US-Iran memorandum should be implemented instead?
Hezbollah with this statement and found and that will lead to reposture of violence and making not peace for the Lebanon. They are making violence as an action for everything. They are bloody and they will make a one copy of Palestine and making not good things for the future for Lebanon nations and the future of it. Just their vision will be put in action. It is very harmful for Lebanon.
From your point of view, what does the Iran file mean for the Lebanon track? And do you think that the Iranian file would have its influence on the Lebanon-Israel track?
If it put an exchange of the peace process in Iran, it will be helpful to solve this problem and this implications for the status of Lebanon, and they are between the Blue Sea and the Hard Rock, and very difficult situation, but it will be solved if they are making this file in exchange of making, for example, limitation for the program or the nuclear problem for them, limitation for some values of sanctions, and will make this is very important thing to put this file or this order in exchange of solving the Iranian state. It will be helpful for Lebanon to overcome from the obstacles and obligations and looking for to be forward for some steps in the future. It will be a good deal if it's done with an action, but at first they must respect their each other and making good deal and time frames for solving this problem immediately and making disarmation for Hezbollah and by the aid of America and other countries can help in that to put peace in action and making a benefit from the scattering and open scattering the deals with Iran and the United States. So it's very important thing to put the goal and the intention for solving the problem and the use of all materials or scopes to make good deal, putting Lebanon in that for peace for next generation and solving the implication states as the military status or military level and the political level also.
Right, remains to be seen. However, Ms. Ibrahim, political analyst and external affairs researcher, we thank you so much for being with us. And what appears increasingly clear is that progress on Lebanon track will remain closely tied to developments in the wider Iran file, with diplomacy facing significant tests on both fronts in the weeks ahead. And with that, I think it remains to be seen. And back to you, Riham.
Thank you so much, Mona, for that interview there. And now to some of the other stories making headlines around the world today.
Donald John Trump can solemnly swear. If you look at that, or we're out.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukrainian missiles have struck a military-industrial facility in Russia's Volgograd region. Zelensky shared video on social media, which he said showed Ukrainian missile launches, flight paths, and impact on targets. In a Telegram post, Zelensky said FP-5 Flamingo missiles had successfully hit the Titan Barricades company in Volgograd, described it as a major industrial complex using manufactured artillery systems and specialized military equipment. Russian regional authorities said 10 people were injured in the strike and that industrial facilities were damaged. Ukraine and Russia have carried out another prisoner exchange, with both sides returning 160 captured soldiers. Images released by the Ukrainian presidency showed Ukrainian prisoners of war celebrating their return home after being freed from Russian captivity. Kiev and Moscow confirmed the exchange took place on June 26th, marking the latest swap of captured troops between the two sides. Prisoner exchanges have remained one of the few areas of cooperation between Russia and Ukraine during the more than 4 years of war. And now to the World Cup, where Egypt have made history by reaching the round of 32, while France and Belgium also sealed top spots in their groups. For all the latest sports updates, we hand it over back to Mona Musser. Hey, Mona, to you.
Thank you so much, Riham, and indeed we have a lot. Yes, and Egypt have booked their place in round of 32 after holding Iran to a draw in the final Group G match in Seattle. Mahmoud Saber gave Egypt an early lead after finding the net in the 5th minute before Ramin Radai equalized for Iran. The results sees Egypt finish second in Group G on 5 points, level with Belgium, but behind the group winners on goal difference. Egypt will now face Australia in the round of 32 next Friday at 9 o'clock Cairo local time in what would be the Pharaohs' first ever appearance in the knockout stage of the expanded World Cup for mate. Egypt coach Hossam Hassan has praised his players after the national team reached the World Cup round of 32. Speaking after the draw with Iran, Hassan said Egypt's qualification as Group G runners-up was a deserved achievement. He praised the commitment and performance of all his players throughout the group stage. On the injuries affected the Pharaohs squad, Hassan said he is waiting for the medical teams to report, but stressed that Mohamed Salah's condition is not serious. Belgium have returned to winning form at the World Cup, beating New Zealand 5-1 to qualify for the round of 32 as Group G winners. Belgium secured their first win of the tournament with a commanding 5-1 victory over New Zealand in the final Group G match. Leonardo Trossard scored twice, while Kevin De Bruyne, Romelu Lukaku and substitute Alexis added the other goals. The result lifted Belgium to 5 points at the top of the group ahead of Egypt's on-goal difference. New Zealand finished bottom with 1 point. France have sealed the top spot in Group I after a 4-1 victory over Norway at the World Cup. Ousmane Dembele scored a first half hat trick, the second fastest in World Cup history, as France ended the group stage with a perfect record. Desiré Doué added the fourth goal before the final whistle, taking France to 9 points at the top of the group. Norway finished second with 6 points, with both teams advancing to the round of 32. And now we go to Rehan Morsi for today's main headlines, making headlines at this hour.
Thank you so much, Mona, for the updates there. A quick recap of the top stories making headlines for this hour. Washington warns sanctions relief could be reversed if Iran fails to comply. Lebanon and Israel move ahead with a US-backed border stability framework. And Hezbollah rejects linking Israeli withdrawal to disarmament. That concludes this hour's bulletin from Qnews, and as the day develops and continues to unfold, our coverage will continue, so stay tuned for more updates here on Qnews.